What if the next world war has already started, but it isn't being fought with missiles, soldiers, or aircraft carriers? What if the real front line is made of vaults, digital ledgers, and billions of dollars quietly flowing through places you and I will never see? And what if the dollar in your pocket, the savings in your bank, and the rising prices in your grocery store are not accidents, but consequences of a secret battle between two superpowers, one trying to keep control of the global system, and the other quietly building the weapon that could break it? Tonight, we dive into the financial war that will determine the next century, because while politicians argue on television, China and the United States have been locked in a silent struggle over the oldest asset in human history, gold. And behind that gold, a mechanism so powerful, so hidden, that the public has never been told the real story. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from right now? This community is global, and your perspective matters. And if you're new here, subscribe for the unfiltered truth you won't hear on mainstream media. Now, let us start with the question no one in Washington or Beijing ever wants the public to ask. Why is China hoarding gold at a rate not seen since the lead-up to World War II? And why is the US pretending not to notice? For most people, the story begins with simple headlines. China buys more gold. US-China tensions escalate. Dollar dominance challenged. But the real origin of this hidden conflict stretches far deeper back to the financial architecture built after World War II. Back to Bretton Woods, 1944, where the US created the world's new monetary empire by tying the dollar to gold and tying every other currency to the dollar. It was simple, elegant, and unbelievably powerful. But here's the part that textbooks forget to mention. This system only worked if the world trusted that the US actually had the gold it claimed. And as early as the 1950s, cracks were already forming. Foreign central banks, France especially, began to suspect the US was printing more dollars than it had gold to back them. Sound familiar? Because today, the same suspicion has returned, but far more aggressively, and from a far more powerful country, China. Back then, in 1971, President Nixon had a choice. Either admit the US had printed too many dollars, or break the promise backing the global financial system. He chose the latter, closing the gold window and ending the ability of nations to convert dollars to gold. Overnight, the US won back complete freedom to print money, and the world entered an era of pure fiat currency. Sound familiar? Because 2020, 2008, and even 2023 all followed the same pattern. Crisis hits. Money printer saves the system. Debts grow, inflation rises, and ordinary people pay for decisions made behind closed doors. But there's one more parallel that's even more dangerous. While the US was expanding the dollar system, China was studying it, watching it, learning exactly where its weak points were. And the biggest one, the one the US hopes no one notices, is this. Every global empire collapses when the rest of the world stops believing its currency is honest. Sound familiar? Now let's jump forward to the 1990s, the decade China quietly began preparing for a future showdown. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the US became the world's undisputed financial superpower. The dollar dominated 85% of global trade. Wall Street controlled massive capital flows, and the Federal Reserve effectively influenced the price of every major asset on Earth. And China realized something. You don't defeat a superpower by attacking its military. You defeat it by attacking the foundation of its wealth. So China began building its long game, creating the Shanghai Gold Exchange in 2002, making gold imports tax-free in 2009, strategically buying mines in Africa, Latin America, and Australia, and most quietly accumulating gold through state-owned banks instead of through its central bank, to avoid reporting to global regulators. This was not random. It was deliberate, focused, strategic, and almost invisible to the average person. Meanwhile, the US was doing the opposite. Exporting manufacturing, expanding debt, printing trillions, and letting Wall Street financialize the economy into a casino. That contrast is the heart of this war, because while America built a system of leverage and derivatives, China built a system of metals and mines. But here's where the story turns darker. The turning point came during the 2008 financial crisis. While the West was drowning in toxic derivatives, collapsing banks, and emergency bailouts, China saw an opportunity, a chance to redefine the world monetary system for the next century. This is where the real secret mechanism behind the Gold War begins. Most people think China simply wants more gold to diversify its reserves. That's the surface-level explanation given to the public. But the deeper truth is something far more explosive. China's goal is to build a parallel global financial system and back it with gold to challenge the US dollar itself. This is the part that governments deny, economists ignore, and the media avoids. This is the part that determines your future. Because while the US prints money backed by nothing but trust, China is building a currency backed by something the world has trusted for 5,000 years: gold. And every empire in history, Rome, Britain, the Ottoman Empire, fell the same way, when their money became weaker than their rivals. This war is not about ideology, not about freedom versus communism, not even about trade. It's about who controls the world's financial oxygen. And here's the twist most people never see coming. The gold China buys doesn't stay in China. No, it flows into a mechanism more powerful, more secretive, and more strategically engineered than any government policy. And it is this mechanism that will determine the outcome of this new Cold War. You won't believe the name behind it. And here's where the mechanics get truly shocking. The tool China uses to quietly accumulate and secure its gold beyond public reporting is the shadow derivatives market, combined with strategic bullion acquisitions through private state-backed entities. This is no ordinary market. It's an opaque web of contracts, futures, and swap agreements designed to control global prices without leaving a trace. Meanwhile, the United States keeps the illusion alive by manipulating the COMEX gold futures, issuing trillions of paper-backed derivatives, and quietly suppressing the spot price of gold through intervention. In 2011, for instance, gold hit $1,900 per ounce, but was quickly managed downwards, creating the illusion of stability. The reality: physical gold was leaving Western vaults faster than anyone could measure. By 2015, China's real gold reserves, hidden within state-controlled private channels, may have exceeded 10,000 metric tons. Compare that to the official number of 1,874 tons reported to the World Gold Council. That's a difference of nearly 8,000 tons, worth roughly $500 billion at the 2015 price, and it's still growing. This is the financial equivalent of stealth warfare, executed over decades. Why does this matter? Because gold is the ultimate store of trust and value. Paper currency, no matter how powerful, is dependent on perception, but gold doesn't lie. Every ounce physically stored in vaults represents real wealth that cannot be inflated away. And the longer the US maintains its dominance through paper dollars while suppressing gold prices, the more dangerous the eventual shift becomes. Let's look at numbers. The US national debt in 2020 exceeded $27 trillion. Global derivatives exposure surpassed $1.20 quadrillion. China held $3.2 trillion in foreign reserves by 2021, with the bulk being stealth gold and US treasuries. COMEX contracts in 2020 represented more than 400 million ounces of gold, while actual physical gold deliveries were only about 60 million ounces. In 2022, US Treasury foreign holdings began to decrease, signaling subtle erosion of trust. These aren't abstract numbers. These are the pulses of a system that can fail without warning. And just like previous empires that hoarded or mismanaged gold, the consequences are unavoidable: wealth concentration, social upheaval, and the eventual collapse of monetary dominance. Now, consider the strategies used by both sides. The US uses liquidity swaps, repo operations, and derivative overlays to artificially stabilize prices. China, on the other hand, acquires actual physical gold through stealth channels, not publicly disclosed purchases, but private agreements, joint ventures in mines, and bullion moved through friendly countries with lax reporting standards. Sound familiar? History repeats. The British Empire once controlled global trade routes and gold supplies. The French Empire collapsed under debt and mismanaged wealth. Rome suffered currency debasement, and today the same pattern emerges: fiat overextension, paper dominance, and a rival quietly accumulating real wealth. This is where we see the moral hazard and greed collide. Western banks profit from manipulating gold prices, creating illusions of stability. Investors trust these illusions. Ordinary citizens unknowingly participate in a system that drains their purchasing power. Meanwhile, China quietly sidesteps the trap, building real assets that will outlast the next financial shock. But here's the most important point. The war isn't about gold itself. Gold is the weapon, yes, but the real prize is the future reserve currency. Whoever controls global trust, liquidity, and perception will define the next century. The United States is playing defense, using centuries-old mechanisms and derivatives to keep the illusion alive. China is building a fence, quietly consolidating physical assets and preparing to challenge the dollar's supremacy. Now, imagine this scenario: a sudden global crisis, whether a banking failure, geopolitical conflict, or massive inflation spike. Paper currencies waver, markets panic. Those who relied on derivatives and paper wealth find themselves exposed. Those with physical gold, those who built real wealth quietly, suddenly controlled the levers of survival. And that's the big reveal. The war is won not by armies, not by trade deals, but by physical wealth that cannot be fabricated or inflated away. The implications are staggering. Global financial chaos could erupt overnight if confidence in the dollar falters. Social unrest could skyrocket as ordinary people watch savings evaporate. The elite, having anticipated these moves, can transfer wealth silently across borders, and China, holding gold quietly in vaults, could leverage this to challenge the US dollar, not through open war, but through economic reality itself. This is not fiction. It's the blueprint of every empire's fall. Overextension, reliance on illusion, and a rival quietly accumulating real assets. The truth is this: we are living in a financial ecosystem built on borrowed time. Every action of the US and China today is accelerating a process that has repeated across history. Empires rise, dominate, and eventually fall, always after they create illusions of wealth, stability, and security. The speed of modern finance makes the next collapse faster, global, and more devastating than ever. A single ripple in the derivatives market, a sudden shift in trust, or a move by China to consolidate gold could send waves through every economy, wiping out savings, destabilizing governments, and redistributing global power overnight. And here's the philosophical lesson: denial is the most dangerous currency of all. Trusting institutions that rely on perception, not reality, is like building a palace on sand. The higher the tower, the more catastrophic the fall. Every dollar, every bond, every digital asset may be part of a fragile system teetering above real wealth, physical gold, resources, and control of liquidity. So what can you do? First, recognize the truth. Money isn't abstract. It's a reflection of power, control, and planning. Second, share this knowledge. Discuss it with others. Awareness is the first defense against manipulation. And finally, subscribe. Follow Dark Finance for insights the mainstream will never show. Because this isn't just about China or the US, it's about the system that affects you, me, and everyone on this planet. It's about understanding the forces behind the economy so you can see the truth for yourself. Ask yourself this: are we wiser now, or just walking the same path in better suits?